My name is Ritika Patney. I'm an undergraduate senior at Cornell University, and I work part-time for the Emerging Markets Institute. I'm really excited to introduce our panel to you today called Technology's Role in Enabling Efficient and Resilient Global Value Chains. Technology is one of the most simultaneously constructive and deconstructive forces of our day and age. It's connecting us globally more quickly and accurately than ever before, allowing us to develop more elaborate supply chains, for example, and diverse workforces, while at the same time constantly dismantling and altering our established processes and how we relate to each other. This panel will explore how technology has disrupted global value chains and how efficiencies in different industries have altered due to technological adoption. I'd like to introduce our panel's moderator, Dan Keeler, senior editor at ImpactAlpha with a focus on smaller emerging markets and financial technologies, and founder of Frontier Market News. Thank you.
So hey, everyone. So yeah, pleasure to be here. And I think we have a global audience as well. So pleasure to be in front of a global audience. We're going to be tackling a pretty interesting subject today. Supply chains obviously have been a focus of a lot of attention, particularly since the pandemic, various other global things going on. We've got three really smart and interesting people joining us. And I think we're going to have a very multifaceted conversation. So I'd love for my fellow panelists to join me on the stage and we can get the conversation started. So Blanca, Claude. So I was thinking we could all sit next to each other here. Yeah. We'll sit in the shadows. Yeah. And I'm going to park myself over here. Do we have just one microphone? And I believe Tina Jabeen is going to be joining us via Zoom. There she is. Hi, Tina.
Oh, hi, Dan. How are you? Hi,
good,
everybody.
Good. All right, great. So let's get started. So I'm delighted to introduce my fellow panelists. We have, I've been practicing pronunciation of this. We have Claude Echahamian joining us from Cornell. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in more detail because I think they can do a much better job of it than I can. And we have Tina Jabeen, who I just mentioned. She's joining us from Bangkok, actually, which is, I guess it's midnight there now, or maybe 11 o'clock. She's at the Bangladesh Startup Consortium, among other things. And we also have Blanca Trevino from Softtek joining us. So just to get the conversation started, Tina, I'd love for you to give us a bit of a background on yourself, how you came to be running the Bangladesh Startup Consortium and some of the things that you've done, including your stints in Silicon Valley, to give us a flavor of what you're doing, particularly your work with female entrepreneurs in Bangladesh.
Thank you so much, Dan. First of all, I would like to thank the university, Cornell University, for inviting me to this conference and share my experience. Just a little bit about my background. I am a chartered accountant from the state of California, certified in California, and worked in the finance and private equity industry for 25 years, most of the time with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then with a fund of fund for Bridge Partners in San Francisco. My birthland is actually Bangladesh. So, when I wanted to kind of wrap up my career here, I wanted to go back to Bangladesh and contribute to the very robust and fast growing economy, especially in the technology and the innovation sector. At that time, the government was putting together a startup ecosystem initiative, and I was very fortunate to be part of that. I led the grant platform for Startup Bangladesh at that time with the ICT Ministry as investment advisor. That was about 5 years ago. And through that grant platform, we actually gave grants to 200 some startups. And as the second phase, we launched a government-funded VC fund, mostly for Bangladeshi startups, and which is now, quite a bit up and going. I am back with now UNSCAP, working mostly on women entrepreneurship, gender lens investment, and SMEs, MSMEs. One of the key project that I was very much involved with was the digital payment platform at the inception, which is now being developed and launched by the Central Bank of Bangladesh. So I would stop there, Dan. If you want to ask specific questions, I'll go ahead and answer. Thank you.
I'm sure, yeah. So actually, I'd love to hear a bit more about UNSCAP. What is that? I hadn't actually heard of that when I first spoke to you.
Sure. It's a United Nations economic, one of the economic development fund, which is mostly focused on Asia Pacific. So that's how SCAP Asia Pacific comes into play, and they work mostly in the emerging economies in Asia and the Pacific areas. And my involvement is with developing the digital capabilities of women SMEs, MSMEs, startup founders. So right now, we are working on developing a digital knowledge platform for the SMEs of Bangladesh, women SMEs. The other project that is being now launched, going to be launched very soon with USAID's help. The name of the project is STARDI DAI, with the DAI, the farm, is again about developing the digital knowledge and the literacy, which they can use, the women entrepreneurs and the SMEs, MSMEs can use to develop their business, how they can use like F-commerce, right? I mean, that is the way to go now. And in Bangladesh, there is a very large, hundreds of and thousands of women SMEs who are also very active in the rural area. So those are the projects that I'm mostly focused on right now.
So that's what I'd really like to focus on too. When I was talking to you before, you told me a really sort of moving or compelling story about some of the people that you've been working with, individuals. This discussion is really about how technology is enabling and enhancing the efficiency of global supply chains. And what you're working on and what you're talking about is people at the very far end of the supply chain using technology just to get started in that space. So if you can just tell us the story of one of the people that you've worked with, and to really give us an idea of how powerful this is.
It is actually awesome, and it is extremely fulfilling to work in this space, because you can see that simple technology, how it is transforming hundreds of thousands of lives. So a small example, I worked as a part of the digital payment platform in the initial stage. I worked on a pilot called wage digitization for a ready-made garments factory worker. In Bangladesh, about 4.5 million RMG workers. And out of that, 70%, more than 70% are women. And one of the things is they don't have a bank account. 90% of them, they don't have bank account. And, they carry their monthly salaries in cash with them all the time because there is safety issue, robbery issue, and also they don't have control on this earning because, the male counterpart of the household, may just take it away. So one of the stories that I shared when we spoke, Dan, is the story of this RMG worker when we, introduced this wage digitization. In the beginning, there was a bit of a kind of a friction with the male counterpart, right? Because now the money is not physical, it's in the wallet and under full control of the female in the household. But then within a year or two, this RMG worker, she was able to save enough so that she bought a piece of land. And, that is a success story. There was also a story of, one of the worker who saved enough to buy a gold chain. So these were not possible, when you have the physical cash, and most of the time you don't have control over it. So that is a huge compelling story in the RMG sector. And what is important is that, this is a story of a worker, but it is impacting your global value chain. I mean, Asia has become a strategic hub, manufacturing hub in the GVC. And we know that, moving money, moving production, moving people is very expensive. But what technology does is through this digital payment, you are moving money fast, cheaper, and it's very transparent. So of course, at the end of the day, it is affecting your GVC of the Cornings and the Unilevers and the Nestles of the world, the Mark Spencers of the world. These are the companies who are very active in Bangladesh, especially Mark Spencer's, Nestle, Unilever. So what is happening is that these big companies, MNCs, where they are reporting requirement for ESG. ESG is a very strong factor for investors nowadays. They are having all these transparency. The social good also comes and adds a lot more value. But these are stories, although it is happening at the very, very minute level, at the far end of the pyramid, very, very bottom of the pyramid. But at the end, it is all funneling up to the big MNCs, to their bottom line, to the investors' radar in the form of a higher ESG rating. So I kind of wanted to brought that up during our discussion. There is another story of there is a platform called Shujog. Shujog means opportunity, and there we have these the bottom of the pyramid vendors, the retail merchants, the FMCGs, the fast-moving consumer good merchants, where these women, they are, placing these small stores at their home, and they're using digital devices, digital means to order inventory. They're getting inventory from Unilever, delivered through like a Uber motorbike services, and the payment is happening digitally. And the best thing is these women, of course, these women, they are otherwise, they'll be sitting at house because it's very unsafe sometimes for them to go out to the market, to the bazaars. But they are actually sitting at the home. They're doing their business. And the best thing is the community women. They're coming to the stores, getting their, daily rations, but at the same time, they're getting their own like feminine hygiene products. And they're building communities. These Shujog Kurmis, we call them Shujog Kurmis. And one of the story is Shujog Kurmi Akhtar. She put $250 as her investment, and now she makes $300 a month. And so you can see that there is not just the impact going up to the big MNCs, but the impact as a community. It's happening in a bigger way. It's impacting the community. So these are some very touching stories, and there are like hundreds of thousands of these. So you can imagine the impact that a simple thing as a digital payment platform, a digital device, can bring to all these folks in the emerging economy. I also mentioned that the Central Bank of Bangladesh also took this big initiative of national payment platform, which is ready to be launched soon this month. And this is kind of similar to UPI in India. And if you think about it, it is this with the interoperability feature. A garments worker can easily send money digitally from one MFS account to another MFS account, can cash out from a bank, even if she doesn't have a bank account. And the best thing is, it's cheaper. The person has control over their money, and overall, it is going to affect, GVC of, every single businesses who are, in this ecosystem.
Yeah, some of these developments are phenomenal, and it's great to hear the actual people being affected by them and driving them as well. So the multinational aspect of it is fascinating. I think when you and I were talking before, you mentioned Marks and Spencers that is sourcing from some 4,500 people in Bangladesh and is now paying them electronically. And just the reduced burden on Marks and Spencers for being able to do that rather than literally, trucking cash around and handing it out in envelopes, with the risks for corruption, for theft, for mismanagement, and just accidental loss within that. The burden that takes off a large company is phenomenal. So it's really interesting to see how you've got this sort of bottom up push for technological innovation, and it's actually having an impact at the very top as well. So talking of the multinationals, I'm going to pull us back to New York here. Thank you, Tina. And I wanted to talk to, oh my God, I'm going to forget your name. This is terrible. Blanca. How is that possible? Blanca, you're very much focused on multinationals. You have a multinational company and you work with multinationals. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your company, and then we can talk about the impact that recent events have had on supply chains?
Absolutely. First of all, it's great to be here. I was here in the last year's conference, but remotely. But coming to the university is always so different, and you feel the energy. So thank you, Lourdes. And let me tell you that you could have forgot my name, but it's so much easier than his last name or even Tina's last name. Mine is easy. But let me talk about myself. That's what you ask. And I'm glad that Tina was the first one, because I'm an entrepreneur. We started our company many years ago, probably almost 40. I don't like to say that, because when you say 40, you start saying, well, probably, how old is she? But we started 40 years ago in Mexico. And being an entrepreneur in Mexico, a tech company, it was something very, very rare. We didn't have all the things that Tina mentioned at that time. It was there was no support for startups in Mexico. Certainly, there was not a single tech company, and a company with global aspirations was even more rare. Not in this industry, in any industry. Again, think about mid 80s. Well, no, you were not born mid 80s. I should not say that. But I like to say that today, even after so many years, we still have that entrepreneurial spirit. And the reason why we have that, it's because from the very beginning we decided to share the company from any perspective. So we have more than 300 partners, shareholders, and the way we did that, it's I like to say that we were convinced that people were looking for that, if we wanted to have our own company, they also wanted the same thing. But the truth is, again, going back to not having money, not having support, it was also something that we needed. So if we wanted to have that global presence or to be involved in many different industries, we needed people focused on different things. So we'll have someone that will say, I want to go to Brazil and open offices in Brazil. And we'll have someone else that will say, oh, I want to be, believe it or not, in AI. AI at that time, not the AI that we know today. So we vary by mid 90s. We already had a very strong presence in Latin America, always focusing on multinationals. Our focus was really the very large corporations. Again, from the very beginning, we said a very strong statement that in a certain way defined us, because we said we want to be a global company. And in order to do that, we molded ourselves that way. And global companies normally will support global or multinational. So from the very beginning, that was our target market in every market in which we played. But in mid 90s, probably 97, we look at the US and we said, wow, we're so close to the US, and there's nothing, and that's the largest market for any kind of industry, but certainly for IT services. And we said, what can we do in the US? Again, looking at those multinationals, in the first years when we started, it was very boring technologies. At that time, they were interesting, but mid 90s, boring. But something what was impressive is the role that India was playing in the IT industry, right? They were the leaders offering what it's called offshore. And we said, well, let's go to India. And we started in 2007. And we started in 2008. And we started in 2009. And we started in 2010. And we started in 2011. And we started in 2012. And we started in 2013. And we started in 2014. And we started in 2015. And we started in 2016. And we started in 2017. And we started in 2018. And we started in 2019. And we started in 2020. And we started in 2021. And we started in 2022. And we started in 2023. And we started in 2024. And we started in 2025. And we started in 2026. And we started in 2027. And we started in 2028. And we started in 2029. And we started in 2030. And we started in 2031. And we started in 2032. And we started in 2033. And we started in 2034. And we started in 2035. And we started in 2036. And we started in 2037. And we started in 2038. And we started in 2039. And we started in 2040. And we started in 2041. And we started in 2042. And we started in 2043. And we started in 2044. today is mainstream. So we look at the US and we said, what is the only way that we can compete in the US to get those kind of clients? And we said we have to get something that is very differentiated. And that's when we came out with the nearshore concept. We coined it. As a matter of fact, it's a trademark. We launched that. And what is behind nearshore? And it was really tackling the deficiencies of the offshore model. So what we'll say, we'll approach those companies that were already working with offshore companies and saying, but why don't you leverage geopolitical advantages? Services is much easier than manufacturing. Nonetheless, it's still interesting at that time saying nearshore could make sense to you. And it took us a few years, but it allowed us to position ourselves in a very different way. I remember someone remind me of this last week that we were in a similar panel, and they invited me. It was 2000, and probably we're a very small company with presence, yes, in Latin America, but nowhere else. And there were the CEOs of very large Indian vendors. And the moderator asked me, Blanca, you should feel very nervous being in this panel. Most companies have been here in the market for 20 years and they're very large companies. And I said, me? No, they should be concerned because I have something that is very differentiated. They compete for the same thing offshore. I'm the only one that offers something similar. What is interesting, and it's today when we talk about nearshore, and I don't know if Claude will agree with me, people forget that it started with services, but today more and more for those geopolitical advantages, those multinationals that you're referring to and that we support, we see that they talk about nearshoring not just for the services, but to in a certain way bring back their supply, and I like much better value chains, but supply chains, because they understand the value of working closely in nearby location. So I like to think that when we said nearshore, people will say, this is not going to work. And today, in every news and every analyst, they will say nearshore, nearshore. So we still today, we are a global company with presence not just in Latin America. The US is our most important market. The second market is Europe. And because we believe in nearshore, we have operations in Spain and in Hungary and those places, so to keep those services. And also, for obvious reason, when you're in IT, you have to be in India and offer offshore services. And not very popular today, but interesting market, China. And so looking back after so many years, we support multinationals, and we have been very fortunate that when you're a technology partner, you sit in the front row. I mean, you have a seat in the front row, and you, in a certain way, you support those companies in their evolution, no matter if it's a bank or it's a manufacturing company or it's a retail company. In different ways, technology has been a key component in their success. And again, no matter where you have in those different countries, we see the same kind of challenges that they are facing. So I believe that we'll keep on seeing technology as a strategic for them. And probably that's the reason why we have this conversation, right? And I love, and probably it's not, you haven't asked that, but I love that you talk about value chain, not supply chain, because when you talk about value, it's broader. It's not just the supply. And I know Claude is in supply because manufacturing, but I am also think that you understand that value start and ends with your customer. And again, privilege, because if you are talking about customers, technology, again, will play a very, very important role there.
So thank you for that. It's super comprehensive view on what you've been up to. So you'd already been fully all in on nearshoring, and then the pandemic happened, and everyone was suddenly saying, "Oh, we need to think about nearshoring." What happened? Were you sort of like, "Hey, we're here, we're ready"?
No, in services, nearshore has been mainstream for many years. Services, IT services. As a matter of fact, again, if I'm gonna remember something, when we started, we were so convinced about nearshoring that when people ask me, oh, but in order to be global company, you have to be in India. I remember Business Week, I said, no, no, no. Indian vendors who have to understand, and in order to keep on offering services, they need to be in a nearby location. So nearshore for IT services has been here for almost 20 years. Many Indian vendors have delivery centers in Mexico or in Latin America in a nearby location. So during the pandemic, it's not nearshore from services that we have seen. Yes, something that was very clear when you think about technology or technology services, it was the talent. It was so easy for companies to go and look for talent everywhere. It was not necessarily services, it was just having access to that talent. I think I shared this with you. We always have this fight for for people, for talent, and companies from Seattle go to Mexico and offer jobs, but those people, many of them will move to Seattle because they will get paid high salaries. But some others will say, no, I like my city. I like to have lunch with my grandmother on Sunday. So no, I will not move. And during the pandemic, it's not necessarily nearshoring because you can have people from Turkey, from Africa, from India. It was people who could stay in their homes and work for any company everywhere. So from services, it was already there. But what changed in COVID, and not just COVID, but geopolitical things in the US and China, people, and I don't know if that is your case, Claude, but start thinking, oh, we should probably move our supply chain or our operations that we have in China to Mexico, or even if not Mexico, Costa Rica, or again nearby, in order to face that. In many cases, then, and you're a journalist, I believe that Mexico is not really taking advantage of that, fully taking advantage, understanding how this can be, I mean, disruptive, and I mean, what it's behind nearshoring operations, manufacturing, could have such an impact in Mexico. But you have to align many things, policies. I mean, again, I hope that no one is recording, but rule of law, many things that are involved for companies to decide where to invest and having operations in there. So something changed during COVID, but more than COVID, when you think about nearshoring, it's manufacturing and it's related to geopolitical things. And that's probably thing between China and the US.
Well, the confluence of events is extraordinary, with the pandemic happening at the same time as trade war happening, and then other world events like Russia's invasion of Ukraine and energy crisis, hunger. I mean, so many things happening at once, all of which will have an impact on the value chain. And then factor in what you were just touching on there about the fact that it's so much easier to work remotely now, and that people are so much more familiar with it. Companies are comfortable with having their workers work remotely. That's transformed everything. I was going to say, so far this has been the easiest panel ever to moderate because you keep answering my questions before I ask them.
Well, so, but because we had a conversation before, probably that was.
I could have just come up here, introduced you, and left again. You carry on the conversation. But talking of the conversation, I'd love to bring Claude in. Claude.
Claude.
Claude. You're in the cloud. So Corning, obviously everybody's heard of Corning. I don't know if anybody knows that much about what you do. I think it's something to do with glass, but I'd love it if you could just fill us in a bit more on what Corning does and how you touch so many different industries.
Thank you, Dan. So, of course, Corning is not very far away from the campus, Cornell campus, about 30 miles. And it's a very exciting industry that we're working in, which is glass. And if you have a chance to go to Corning, you absolutely need to visit the Corning Museum of Glass. So this is probably one of the very few in the world where you would see things that are just amazing. And does anybody in the audience know when the first piece of glass was made by human being on Earth? Any idea? 2,000 years before Christ. So during 4,000 years, glass has been a material that kept being reinvented. And that's the sort of thing which is quite amazing with that material. And today we're connected through optical fiber. I mean, there's nothing more wired than a wireless network. So fiber comes here, was invented in 1968 by Corning. And today there's a lot of demand for optical fiber around the world, accelerated by the COVID, of course, people working from home, but you need to have more bandwidth and things like that. If you have one of the latest Samsung phone, which is bendable, you would see that the glass screen is just bending like a piece of paper. Believe it or not, that piece of glass that protects your Samsung phone is made in one of our factory in France that was founded by Louis XV in the 18th century. So since then, we're still making glass there, and now we make that glass that you have in your Samsung phone, which is bendable. So this is just an incredible material. Sorry, I'm so excited when I talk about what we do here, but that's really the way it is. Yeah, there's a story. So what I do, I run one of these business called Advanced Optics, and we do things that go to the space. So if you heard about the James Webb telescope, we did the design of the optics there. So they are like millions of kilometers away. That's the order of magnitude. At the same time, we do glass that are being used in mirrors to do the lithography for chipset, which are as small as a few nanometers. About 16 billion transistors now on the A16 in the iPhone. This is being enabled by glass we made up New York State, which allows the lithography to create chips with even more density all the time. So that's what we do in Advanced Optics. We're very excited about that. Back to your question about the value chain and what you just said, Bianca, we are already nearshoring since many years. We had to be close to our customers and we had to be close to our regions. You don't want to transport optical fiber cable over continents. You want to make it in regions already. So we have a pretty regionalized approach. More than 70 factories around the world. Most of our employees are non-American. They're mostly Asian and Mexican. We have a very, very big presence in Monterrey, as well as Reynosa, for many years. So we have a lot of manufacturing happening there. I was there. I visited Tech de Monterrey in May. Very impressed by the way they build up there and trying to attract companies. So we're very strong in optics. We're looking for talents in that world. So yeah, we're very regional already, and we're trying to stick to our customers and be as close as them as possible.
So what are some of the challenges that you've faced in the past 2 years or so?
Oh, there's been a lot. Where should I start? Yeah.
What are the highlights?
Yeah, let's use the chronology. So COVID happens and most of our customers and everybody starts saying, oh, we're going to shut down. We stop ordering. Right? Everybody did that. Guess what? 4 months later, they doubled orders, tripled orders, say, oh no, I need more of that. Everybody is staying home, buying a new TV screen, Corning glass, needing more bandwidth, more optical fiber cable. They got a little bit more money than usual because they don't go to restaurants or don't go on holiday.